This is Nina Dolly, and I want to show you our ancient house. This house was built in 1750. It's made all of logs and only went up to where you can see the siding. And then it just had a loft upstairs. In 1800, they added another half to it, and in almost 1900, they raised the roof to be a full upstairs. This is the mill race that supplied the water to the mill for an overshot wheel, which is down under the basement. It was built with stone on the one side and a deep, it was like 6 feet deep, and it came for a quarter of a mile all through Tom's Creek up there. Then Tom's Creek continued on down behind the mill, but this brought water power, came in here and went under to the wheel. This is an overshot water wheel that the water came in on the top. There were close to 100 buckets on them, which had to be replaced quite often because they would rust out. And in the winter it would freeze and they would shoot it with a rifle to get it off, and of course that helped deteriorate the buckets. So the power came in from the water wheel to these great big cogs. Up here is one that has wooden cogs, because when they would have a choke, it would break something, and you didn't want to break your metal because they were too expensive, so you had these replacements for in these wooden cogs. But the power changed from horizontal to vertical to go up clear to the attic. Up here you can see the bottom of the burr stone. That's what that white thing is up there. So these are the flour elevators. The wheat would have been dumped in here and went by these big elevators up to the attic to be dumped in and come down through the other machines. So they have big buckets on. These have smaller buckets, and each one is according to the load that it would have been. This has a canvas belt with a small bucket, and each of those would be that way. All of these chutes, every chute had a view place, because when you had a choke, you had to clean it out. So they had to be able to get into every chute. This is the cornmeal burr. This is what you would see when you went inside. The corn came down and went into here, and this thing went around real fast to break up the corn kernels so they would go down inside. And then and this mill at one time had 3. 2 were for flour and 1 was for cornmeal. In my knowledge, we didn't have that, because in 1800 they changed the thing to have a roller mill. So now, if you swing over here, this is what it looked like inside under that woodwork. These 2 large stones, they're each about a ton. The bottom one is stationary, the top one turns, and it grinds the corn. The corn goes down in between them and grinds it and goes into this hole, which goes up to the attic by these big belts over here. You can see they have fallen down, but they have the great big buckets. But that goes up to the top and then comes down and is sifted upstairs. In the back are the elevators that take the flour up to the attic, and they come back down through screens. But here originally are 3 rollers, actually 6 rollers. There's 2 in each one of these. You can't see the far one very well, but that one put the grain through first and just took the outside off. It went down to the cellar, up to the attic, and back down through screens. Then it came to the next one, and then to the next one, according to which screen it did or didn't go through. And that's what all these tubes are up here, putting it back to the right place so it can be reground. Back there are the elevators, which run all the way from the cellar to the attic and bring the flour up and down. This is an eccentric. It moves very fast. That wheel in the middle would go around very fast. That's why there are silk stockings going into the top and silk stockings going out of the bottom, so it had the flexibility that it needed, and it's suspended by these poles, which is amazing that they hold all that weight. Anyway, these are the screens. This is what they look like, and they were stacked up, and they have material on here. And here are the new silks to put on in case you get mouse chew or whatever. And they have a thread count, like a lady's sheet, and the flour had to go through that. And what it did go through, it would go to the next one down below to be rolled. What it didn't go through, it would go back to the front of the plant and start all over again. This is called Aesop's Rotary Electrifier. What it does, it's a motor that goes very, very fast, actually running backwards to create ozone that electrically bleaches the flour. Now, flour bleaches within 2 months, but the ladies wanted it white right away. And so it shot the ozone up through a tube, and it met with the flour coming down, and it mixed it immediately. So it was electrically bleached, let's say. This is the motor that runs 33,000 ohms per second or something like that, some fantastic that creates the ozone. This is a section that is animal feeds. The corn is dumped in on the front porch. It goes down to a tank in the basement and then comes by elevator up here. We have the corn separator, the corn cracker, anything that has to do with the animals. This is where the corn part is. So that's all. This is the cornmeal separator or sifter. The cornmeal comes down from the attic and comes into here on this end. This shakes, of course, everything shakes. And what goes through goes down here into this one and is then deposited downstairs where we pack it for people. What doesn't go through here goes down and is used for animal feeds. This is the famous cob where Mr. Jingle lost his life, and that's why my grandfather bought the mill, because the mill was available. But you had to stand up in here to grease it, and that's why he got his clothes caught in it. And anyway, this is the top of the power that still comes from the water wheel. Okay, this is a winch that in the early times they would bring feed up from the basement clear up here and to put it in the bins over here. We have lots of bins. And you could operate it from in the floor by using this rope to release it, or you can see that thing move there to turn the belt on or off. Okay, this was one of the first early sifters for the flour, and the flour would come in at that end, and this would roll, and what went through went down to be for people feed, what didn't went to animal feeds, or it went back to the front of the plant. It took a lot of maintenance to put that on. They got mouse chew and bug chew, and they had to glue it. They would glue it when there was only a couple spots, and that's what all those little dots are on there. It's the glue. Okay, this is the wheat scales that it came through first. Went down to the basement, up to the attic, then came down through the rollers until it was all finished. Then it came here to be packed. This would be the lady's choice, which was for cake flour and cake and whatever, puddings, whatever. So this would be Blendwell flour. That would be Western wheat. It's harder and it's for bread. So they had their own separate areas, and they were packed separately and labeled separately. This is what we consider our museum. It isn't really noteworthy stuff, maybe, but a lot of these things were found here, and they're old, they're very ancient. We have some modern equipment like that even I knew, toasters, and here's candle makers. No, I never used these, but there's a lot of things that we don't know what they are, some of them, and some of them we do. Of course, there's equipment and machinery. And it goes over to housewares, which we've kind of cleaned that off. Well, that's the gist of it, and I thank you for coming to see us and to seeing our mill tour. I'm very proud of it. I was born and raised here and have been a very big part of this, especially in the last couple of years since we've been restoring.